Ah, Tyler, what's wrong with your face?
Ah, what's wrong with your face? Oh,
I know. Why were we cursed with these symmetrical features? And
I don't know.
we have
Why?
we have regular noses and not snouts.
Why must we be so hideous
I know.
with
I know.
with a with an upper lip like this? It's
Yeah,
just
that just goes in a straight line instead of all curved and jagged and a big sloping overlip.
yeah.
It's awful. It's awful. What a curse to live like this. Uh,
hmm
Yeah. Hello and welcome to Twilight Zone Tuesdays presented by Ignore the Bell. My name is Nathan.
And I'm Tyler.
And if you did not catch that, it's because you have not seen the episode of the Twilight Zone, Eye of the Beholder, which is also sometimes called the Private World of Darkness, because I've been doing a little bit of research. They somebody sued them saying you can't use the name like the title Eye of the Beholder. So then they're like,
Hmm.
or one or the other, or the Private World of Darkness. And so like depending on when the episode was aired on television, which station was airing it, then they had to switch the title. But that's the only difference. It got
Okay.
resolved, but anyway, it is confusing because I know I think my collection of the Twilight Zone, it's I think called the Private World of Darkness, but then on Netflix, I think it's called Eye of the Beholder.
hmm
So
Yeah.
this was first aired November 11th, 1960, and this is season 2, episode 6. And so, if you are new to this, what we're doing is we are looking at 13 of some of my favorite episodes of the original Twilight Zone series. I've These are ones that I've chosen, and Tyler has not seen all of them. You've seen a few, but
Yeah.
not all of them. And basically we're just having short little discussions, so we're doing 13 of them because it's 13, right? So the Twilight Zone, and then we're talking for a minimum of 13 minutes about each episode. And I've also done a
hmm
companion series with some of these. If they were based off of an original short story and then adapted into a Twilight Zone episode, then I've read the short story and I've done a separate video for that. But this one is an original screenplay by Rod Serling, who is the narrator of the show.
Yep.
So yeah, we'll get into it. And yeah, so our sponsor for today is swineplasty. Listen, folks, you don't want to get rhinoplasty because then you're just going to have a bridge to your nose. Instead,
Right.
you want to get yourself a nice crooked snout. So that way you can be handsome and beautiful like all the people in this episode of Eye of the Beholder, right? So
Yeah.
contact the good folks over at Swineplasty today. Get a crooked snout immediately.
Yeah, I understand that you can get a bit of a discount with the discount code that we have. I am definitely going to be taking advantage because, ugh, I just I
I
can't
know.
stand this thing.
Right. I know. When I have enough money, I'm going to get Botox, but just on my upper lip
Mm,
and not on the
yeah,
lower lip. Yeah.
yeah.
Don't
But
make it extra handsome.
as far as I understand, you're only allowed 11 tries, and
That's
then
right.
yeah,
Yeah. And if it fails after 11 tries, then you have to go and live with the handsomest man on the planet.
yeah.
All right, folks. I hope you enjoy.
There is a fifth discussion beyond that which is known to man. It is a discussion as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between anger and joy, between silence and outrage, and it lies between the pit of Nathan's fears and the summit of Tyler's knowledge. This is a discussion of intellectual properties. It is a podcast which we call Ignore the Bell.
All right, so we're talking about Eye of the Beholder or the Private World of Darkness. So you had not seen this episode before, and I kind of cautioned you before you watched it. I said that it's so obvious what they're doing with this episode that
hmm
like it's not that it's bad because I think it's exploring really interesting themes,
Yeah.
but it's also not really as clever as I think they maybe thought that it was because you know there's going to be a twist. I guess you just don't know what the twist is going to be.
Uh, Yeah, I mean, in that first scene, then I was like, oh, she's gonna look normal and they're gonna look weird. I don't know what they're gonna look like, but they're definitely
Exactly.
gonna look weird.
That's what I'm saying is that it's so obvious, but I
Yeah.
forgot because it's been quite a few years since I've watched this, and we were talking about this before. I have shown this to English classes before, but I cannot for the life of me remember what I was attaching it to. If there was a short story or something, because and I was saying that it would work if I was using it for philosophy as an introduction to the branch of philosophy of aesthetics, but I wasn't using it for a philosophy course, so I don't know. But it's very obvious what this episode is playing around with. But then rewatching it, then I realized, oh no, but it's doing all this interesting stuff with like a dystopia and, conforming to the norm and these deviations from the norm, and there can only be one norm in this society. Oh, it's got to be, it's got to be the chrysalids. John Wyndham's The Chrysalids. That's what I attached it to. I remember now.
I have not read that.
Oh, you should. It is so good as a dystopian novel. Boy, oh boy, it's a treat. It really is. You would love it. It's great.
Yeah, I'm sure that I would. I love anything, any type of dystopian fiction. And yes, I really enjoyed this episode, despite me knowing exactly where it was going. It was fun to see, the different ways that they moved the camera, and moved, had like the staging in this episode is very well done.
Yes.
In terms of blocking out everybody's faces.
The staging, the blocking, the use of lighting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Really, really well done. One thing that really stood out to me is the screens that come down and show their fearless leader.
Yeah.
That's such a great effect for the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just so futuristic looking. Like, we still don't really have that.
No, we don't. Yeah, it's pretty terrific. Yeah, and so that's the thing is I feel like this episode I was surprised because I guess I didn't remember it being as strong as it is, because it is just from a filmmaking standpoint, it's really fascinating just to watch how they filmed it. I've been doing a little bit of research, and apparently it was, one of the most difficult Twilight Zone episodes to film, because they just, it's just, and like there's no real special effects. This is all like as far as like computer generated, there's nothing like that.
Right.
So they had to be very technical in how they set up all of their shots and lighting and everything else. So from that standpoint, then it's really interesting. And then you don't know what they're going to look like and what our protagonist is going to look like. So if you haven't seen it before, then that's a fun little reveal because you know where it's going to go, but you still want to see it.
Yeah.
Because you're denied for so long in this episode. And the other thing that I was reading, which I thought was interesting, is that apparently the director of this episode, because of the nature of it, then he wanted to make sure that all of the nurses, the medical staff, the doctors, he wanted to make sure that they had really sympathetic voices. So what he did was he cast it with his back to them. So he couldn't see them. He could just hear their voices because he wanted to have the sympathetic voice, because it's really just voices until the very, very end. And they are sympathetic voices. And you can see that like they feel so awful for this poor deformed woman who's of course by our standards not deformed at all, but that is really fascinating, that the director would go to that effort in the casting process. And it's such a simple solution. That's what I think I love so much about the original series of the Twilight Zone. You see the special effects and then you go, oh, that's such a simple way of doing it, but it's so effective.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And the prosthetics are awesome.
Yeah.
They're so great.
They really hold up. Like it's terrific. So I do want to get your thoughts on this, but I just wanted to say that it's interesting at this time period how many different movies and TV shows and things like that are exploring this theme, because these are very much Star Trek themes that you get with the original series, because Star Trek was doing a lot of social commentary. This is obviously predating Star Trek by several years, but in this era, so I was thinking about this, and it's like, they look weird and different, but they're a person underneath there, right? Like that kind of theme. And then you get Planet of the Apes around this time as well, the original Planet of the Apes. And it's, well, why can't apes, be in charge and we're the apes to them? Because like there's a great line in Planet of the Apes where Charlton Heston goes to kiss, I forget her name, but the woman ape who's been helping him, and he like says like, yo, like I want to kiss you, and then she's like, but you're so damned ugly. And
Yeah.
it's funny because they look grotesque to us, but then Charlton Heston looks like, a handsome guy, but then of course from her perspective. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's playing with this, and I've got a theory about this, which I'm sure that I'm right on the theory. I'm saying it's probably doing other things, but this aired in 1960, and what you had going on at this point is you had segregation in the United States, and then so all the Jim Crow laws from Reconstruction until the Civil Rights Act of '63, I believe, and in 1955 you have Brown versus Board of Education, which effectively desegregated schools in the U.S. South, and this is all about segregation. This episode.
Yeah.
And it's all about you need to be with your own kind, and then saying, well, those people look hideous to us. So, but it's at the same time saying, but they're a person underneath. They might look different, but they're a person just like I'm a person. And they can't help the way they were born. Because I know that you had all of these debates of people saying, I don't want, the races mixing in the US South and all these segregated communities as they're going through desegregation. First school desegregation, and then you start getting, by the time you get the Civil Rights Act, everything desegregates. Whether it's movie theaters, drinking fountains, bathrooms, train stations, like everything desegregates. But that was not an easy process, and there was so much resistance. And so I think that's where these themes are coming from in different texts of the late 50s, early 1960s, of saying to people, even if you think, that Black people are somehow different, like, look deeper.
Yeah.
Stop looking skin deep.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I had the exact same reaction to this episode where, yeah, I mean, you've got her talking about, the ghettos and
Yeah.
she outright says, like it's just segregation. Why do we have to, be segregated and all that? And yeah, I mean, I didn't, like I'm not as familiar with American history, so I didn't know like the exact, time of these other things like Brown versus the Board of Education and all that. But yeah, it was very clear to me that this was, dealing with that theme of, just because they look different, like they're still human. They're like we're all actually one race, the human
Right.
race. So,
Which is
yeah.
where I think that in part is where this is. At the time, it was maybe a helpful social commentary,
Mm,
and now it's problematic, let's say,
mm,
because they're still segregating them and saying, yeah, those people who look that way, even though they look hideous, they're people
right.
too, but it doesn't ever get beyond they're hideous.
Right. Yeah.
And like this society doesn't move past it. But the yeah, so I don't know. The other thing though that I think is happening here, which I want to get your thoughts on, is it seems like, well, I'm sure that the episode is also a commentary on communism. And
Mm,
so
mm,
because it's all about there can be, and I do have a few of the quotes from it. I just wanted to find them. It talks about glorious conformity,
right.
and you get there can be a single norm, a single philosophy of government. Like
Hmm.
that's communism in this era, and it's of course Cold War. Television at this point, right? There's Cold War politics that are going on, and so I think this is similar to what we were talking about with the Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, where we talked about the idea that the enemy of the United States wants the United States to fight with each other. Like they want there to be inner turmoil within the United States. They want us to turn on each other and saying, we can't do that because we have real enemies. And so I feel like this episode is commenting on that. Basically, my point is, within a communist system of government, it's like there can only be one system of government, one philosophy. Everybody has to conform, and then saying, isn't this monstrous? Don't we want to have diversity? Don't we want to have a pluralistic society where people are different, but we all get along together? That some people look like that, some people look like that, and it doesn't matter because we're all the same people, and we oppose any philosophy that says we all have to identify in the same way. That it's basically to some degree, I think it's a call to action to say, we have to oppose the communists who want everybody to be exactly the same, to have equal outcomes. That it's okay if some people are, whatever, more successful than others, and different fashion than other people, and whether it's like different races or whatever you're talking about, to just have a pluralistic society.
Yeah, no, that is a very interesting reading. I think like you definitely get some of the imagery is very similar to what we would associate with communism, and well, specifically dictatorships, I suppose.
Yes,
like they've got their fearless leader, right?
Exactly.
So,
exactly. And then the doctor is questioning that,
right?
And the nurse cautions him, like, hey, be careful, like you can't say those things, right? And so in America, it's basically like if somebody's saying, hey, like I don't think that we should have black communities and white communities. I don't think we should have black schools and white schools. And the people are like, that's un-American. And then it's like, hey, like, what the hell are you saying? Why is it like, turn this around and say that, don't you think that's what, communists want us to do, is to hate each other and fight each other and not be united as a diverse people. Right. And so that's where I think you can look at this and say, because on the one hand, I feel like it's kind of weak that they still segregate, but I don't think that's really the good solution. We should look at this episode and the conclusion and say, we don't want to be that society that does segregate.
No, I agree. It's interesting.
Yeah, you're still good. Your camera just cut out for a second.
All right. It's interesting because if an episode was, or if this story was to be told now, then it would not have been all about like the hiding the face and all that. It would start with, the people being in their segregated community. And it would have just been a completely different story, It would have been about like how awful this government is, and how they need to rise up and fight against it. So
okay. I mean, that's a great comment, but because in my research, then I found this. So in 2003, because they redid the Twilight Zone in 2003. So this is from the Wikipedia article, so it might be incorrect, but it's, rare for that to happen. Right. Usually there's some political reason why somebody changes it. I don't think people are changing the original Twilight Zone entries on Wikipedia, at least not very often. So it says the 2003 remake. This episode was remade for the 2002-2003 revival of the series using Serling's original script, with Molly Sims as Janet Tyler, Reggie Hayes as Dr. Bernard, and Reggie Cross as a leader. The makeup was changed to make the faces look more melted, ghoulish, and decayed with deep ridges. The remake follows the original script more faithfully. The projection screens were changed to plasma screens, and more of the dialogue from the leader's monologue was used. But they used Serling's original script in 2003. So it's so interesting that you're saying if they remade this more recently, then they would not use this script and they wouldn't explore that part of the story. And instead, in 2003, they were like, the exact script, a shot-for-shot remake, but with better makeup.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that you're right. That's why I'm so surprised, because this is such a great story. This is such a great concept. And starting in that other community or focusing on the other community would be so interesting. And instead, they're like, a shot-for-shot remake.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. It would have been like it if the original did not happen and they were making this now,
Go. Okay.
uh,
Yes. Yes.
then yeah, that then it would very much be, okay, well, we need to make sure to show off how disgusting, the normal people look,
Yeah.
um, aka the pig-faced people.
Yeah.
So they would really focus on them. They would not be hiding, them. They'd be so like the studio or whatever
Yeah.
would be so proud of their technical prowess of
Right.
their effect that they were just like, no, we got to put it on full display here.
Right.
Um, and
Right.
this, and it's like you still get a fair bit of that at the end, where you get to see a lot of them. It's
Yeah.
not just one,
Yeah.
which I really like. But yeah, I feel like this is something that's lost in today's uh, era of writing,
Mm.
um, where it's just, so many writers uh, are being asked. It's not even that they are like intentionally doing it, but they can't sell something that doesn't show off actors' faces. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, we had just talked about this with The Mandalorian, where of course they had to show his face eventually because there's no
Yes.
way they're going to hire an actor and not show off his face for
Right.
the entire thing. And it's
Right.
like, well, but you could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and now we're getting kind of similar discussions though over, um, oh, it's all plastered under CG. It's like, well, that's I don't know. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting that instead of it being, masked um, by prosthetics, then now it's being masked by CG, and then it's like, oh, you're losing some of that original actor. And I
Mm.
feel like you know, I feel like that is accurate and that there is a lot more that you get you know, out of the prosthetics, out of like
Yeah.
actually seeing, that that's just what they look like. Like you get to see their eyes and,
Yeah.
whatever. And the way that their voice is just slightly off throughout
Yeah.
the entire episode because they're speaking through those prosthetics, I think
Yeah.
works so well.
Mm.
And again, that's something that would be lost if you just did it with CG, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, and that is because that brings up such an interesting point, especially when we're looking at like the de-aging technology
Right.
that is starting to get employed more and more. That it's essentially like because we've people, critics, media critics have been incredibly, um, you know, critical of airbrushing on magazine covers and Photoshop and all of that, and how and saying, this is not what, especially with women, right? But they do it
Yeah.
with men as well. But with women in particular, giving this false image of beauty, this standard that is impossible to meet, to say, that women don't actually look like that. But if you see it enough on magazine covers, then you think, but that's what really beautiful women look like. And
Right.
so, especially young girls look at that and feel like they can never live up, and it causes a lot of insecurity, and a whole bunch of other issues as well. So it's like we've all, like, media critics have been obviously pointing that out for a very long time, and
Yeah.
doing a pretty good job. But I wonder now if that's like going to be more of a thing with like this de-aging, because I mean, I watched The
Right.
Irishman, and they just gave Robert De Niro blue eyes, which I
Right.
think don't work. They're too blue. They're like, I've never seen somebody with, like, they basically are glowing. It's kind of creepy at times, but it's like, so now it and I don't think we're quite there, but it seems like we're getting closer to the point of, well, just make me more handsome for the role. Just,
Right.
make her more
Yeah.
beautiful for the role. And it's like we can't even allow people to look the way people look.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think that that is really fascinating when we're talking about this episode,
that's what I'm
which
saying.
is, yeah, I love the line of the doctor toward the end where he says, he finally takes off the bandages and then he says, no change.
Yeah.
It's like, what are they doing that they literally can't make any changes whatsoever?
It's so funny because you're like, that's exactly. Then what the hell is this procedure? Like, was the
Right.
procedure just taking pills and then you hope? Was this not surgery? How is there no change? That they keep like putting a snout on her and then her face just whoop, and then it goes back to the original. It's
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one other thing that I wanted to say though. Which is I also think this is interesting because now on the one hand you still have all of these issues with Photoshop and airbrushing and like I say even moving into like this de-aging technology, and your point about CGI and what they're doing with all of that, instead of using prosthetics. That the other thing though that we have going on simultaneously in our society is there's this growing body positive movement, right? Where it's saying, no, we're going to celebrate bodies that are not what the publishing industry, specifically like the beauty magazine, the fashion industry has deemed beautiful. And so saying, yeah, this woman who's curvier is beautiful, and this woman who's shorter than runway model, she's beautiful, and saying it's okay if you have a different body type, you are beautiful too. That's kind of the body positive movement. And I think that's what this episode, that's what I'm saying, that I think that's kind of a weakness of this episode. It's still saying, well, clearly one side is hideous and the other side is beautiful. But
Right.
wouldn't a more involved discussion of aesthetics be something that's a little bit more subjective, where it's saying, you see my point? That just because you look different doesn't mean that you're not beautiful. Because this episode is just like, yeah, you're definitely hideous. They say that, like you remain hideous, and
no, I mean it is interesting because the woman, Miss Tyler, is trying to present different options other than being segregated, and it's just like, no, this is the way that we have to do it. And it's like, well, why? Like there could be other options. It's something where, and I don't mean this in terms of like, oh, they'll still be hideous but they'll be accepted, but rather where it's like a way of integrating,
Yes.
and just making it be like a normal thing. And I just, yeah, I think that the episode is so focused on its twist at the end, that it just ignores all these really fascinating things that it could go into, that it kind of teases with what Miss Tyler says, with what Dr. Bernard says, like all of that. And it's just like, they're talking about some really cool stuff, but it's funny though, because like watching this episode, then I was thinking like, man, this would definitely not be good as an hour-long episode, because like it would just feel so drawn out.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
there's so much that they could pull out of it to make a bigger story.
I agree. I agree with you on both counts, that it would not be good as an hour-long episode, but at the same time, it's pulling at all of these different threads of, whoa, that's super interesting, but they're not getting explored. And I do wonder, I feel like Rod Serling as a writer, he's so interesting because I don't know how he had so many great original concepts, these premises for these episodes, and he just churned out script after script after script. And I cannot imagine, because he was like doing so much writing. I mean, like you're talking about like something like, I'm pretty sure it comes out to somewhere around like 24 scripts a year.
Right.
Like 20 something. If you look at it, you look at how many he wrote, it's staggering. Like that's like, I don't think that's ever happened again. I know that what's his name, it's terrible that I'm forgetting his name, but like who wrote, did the West Wing,
oh my goodness, Sorkin.
Aaron Sorkin. Sorkin wrote an incredible amount of the episodes of the West Wing, and kind of wouldn't relinquish control. So I guess maybe he's another example of that, but it's very rare in Hollywood to have a screenwriter who just is
Yeah.
And even with The West Wing, it was just established characters that he continues to explore with. But with this, it's one idea after another after another. And he's constantly setting it up, resolving it within one episode. And I think that he was just like a genius factory that was just churning out all of these genius premises and like concepts. But he didn't always have enough time, I think, to quite get it to where it could have been.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I feel like this episode in particular, he wrote it as a bit of just as a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Of like, oh,
It
let's
feels
see,
like that.
you know, how long we can go without showing anybody's faces.
Totally.
Which is a great, you know, exercise.
It's great on its own.
Yeah.
But then I'm saying the dude accidentally stumbled, or maybe intentionally stumbled, but I think he just had so many great ideas that it's just like, dude, you just brought up so many fascinating places to take this story, and he's like, oh, I gotta end it. So
yeah, it's really fascinating. I kind of wanted to see if there, you know, with the segregated community, if there would be people who look different than these two, you know, these two supposedly standard, you know,
like deviants.
Right. Yeah. Because it would have been really interesting to see, you know, if there were others that looked, you know, I mean, obviously this isn't something that would have happened at the time, but, you know, if there was like an Asian person or, you know, somebody of African descent, like, you know, it just would have been really interesting to see how all of them got segregated there, but they all look normal. And it's just, there's so much that you could pull out of this. And it's,
totally. It's so funny too, because I look at this and it's just like, there's a lot of different kinds of ugly, right? But in this one, it seems like their only kind of ugly is what we consider to be absolutely beautiful, because she's a beautiful woman, and this is like the handsomest man in the world, right? He's just like, he's so perfect, and then she's like, oh, and she doesn't want to go near him, you know, she doesn't want to touch him, she's like, you know, against the doctor, and it's just like the handsomest man in the world is just like, oh, I think you'll like the Community. And
I think the thing that really kills me about this is that their hair is perfect on both of them. Like, no woman like just had bandages taken off of her head, but it's still like perfect curls.
Perfect curls. Yeah, it's true. And it's just funny because you see what I'm saying is that, like, when we look at ugly, then we like, there's a lot of different ways that somebody can be unattractive, right? But with this, it just seems like their kind of ugly is, you know, there's only one kind of ugly, which is perfectly symmetrical features and
no, like, what if the person has the other side of their lip, you know, extended, right?
Exactly. But yeah, this is super fun. I really enjoyed this episode more than I thought. I guess I've misremembered. I think in part because I had shown it to classes multiple times, and trying to get like a grade 10 class to sit through that much of an episode where like they're gonna be ugly, and I'm like, yes, we all know that's where it's going, shut up. Like, trying to get them to be calm enough to be like, yes, we know where the twist is, but there's more to the episode than that. Just so I guess I forgot how much I enjoy it because I'm not trying to manage an entire room full of teenagers while watching it, because that's the last couple times I watched it was just in that setting. So I'm like, oh yeah, I like this more than I remembered. So
no, it's a very good episode. A lot that could have been explored that wasn't, but even still, the episode is such an achievement of filmmaking.
And
agreed. Just so good.
All right, folks, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to comment below, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Imagine, if you will, subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Leave your comments below, and maybe, just maybe, you'll receive a response. All for a channel referred to by many as Ignore the Bell.